The ancient philosophy of Stoicism arose out of the Roman Empire and was popularized by some incredible minds from various walks of life, from the Emperor Marcus Aurelius to the former slave-turned-philosopher Epictetus. The principles of Stoicism have pervaded popular culture with thousands of self-help books pointing towards its seemingly immortal relevance. However, Stoicism does not work for everyone, and it can even do more harm than good in some cases. Here's why. The main theme that we're going to unpack throughout this video is this fundamental Stoic principle that we have to exert some level of control over our emotions to prevent them from running our lives. Principle 1 of Stoic philosophy states the single most important practice in Stoic philosophy is differentiating between what we can change and what we cannot, what we have influence over and what we do not. Ultimately, this principle boils down to the fact that we should let go of the things that we do not have control over. For example, your Uber driver is 30 minutes late due to an unexpected winter storm and you miss your flight. The correct response is not to lash out on your Uber driver or get upset at your family. Ultimately, something happened that was outside of your control. So a Stoic would say you must detach yourself from that event. Despite feeling that anger and disappointment, there's no reason to lash out or have this over-the-top emotional response because ultimately it's not going to fix anything. The principle here, I think, is very reasonable. The fact that you shouldn't respond to things that are outside of your control in such a negative way. But one, it's way easier said than done. And two, it's not accounting for the fact that that emotion has naturally arose. So what I'm more interested in personally is not necessarily modulating a correct response to your emotion, but exploring why that emotion arose in the first place. So I agree that the ultimate goal is to enact a better, more appropriate response, but I think that a true resolution of the issue will only come from facing that emotion, not suppressing it or trying to ignore it or overpower it. So this leads us to another principle of Stoic philosophy, principle number 2. If there's a central message of Stoic thought, it's this: impulses of all kinds are going to come, and your work is to control them, like bringing a dog to heel. Put more simply, think before you act. Ask, who is in control here? What principles are guiding me? So ultimately, impulses are a product of the unconscious mind. They arise what seems like out of nowhere. They take over your conscious experience and then they disappear. You crave a piece of candy, you fall in love with somebody, or you have the desire to hurt people. Ultimately, all those impulses arise from the same place: the unconscious mind. So when discussing the nature of the unconscious mind, there's really two predominant views. One is the perspective that the unconscious mind is more primitive, that is kind of this wild beast that needs to be contained if we're going to properly pursue our goals and attain our dreams. This is very much a Freudian perspective of the unconscious mind, and it seems to be the direction in which Stoicism leans. The other perspective is that the unconscious mind is not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but has the potential for both. So yes, the unconscious mind can stimulate these feelings of fear, sadness, depression, and anxiety, but can also stimulate the feelings of happiness, contentment, and love. This is really the main dichotomy between Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. Jung saw the unconscious mind as much more than just a dog in need of healing, like Freud did. Sigmund Freud has this incredible quote that really embodies this perspective. It goes, "Where id was, ego shall be." It's this idea that every single unconscious aspect of our life should be brought into the light and control of our ego. And now obviously Stoics do not support completely getting rid of emotions entirely. Individuals who abide by these philosophical principles are absolutely capable and willing and desiring that feeling of love, for example, or contentment or happiness. And they're not just completely getting rid of the ability to feel emotion. So then, is Stoicism simply a method for pruning the branches of the unconscious mind, getting rid of those negative impulses, those negative emotions, and trying to preserve the positive ones? I think it's clear that Stoicism offers a mechanism to redirect that negative kind of energy, those negative emotions that we have. We don't have to spend our energy on those. We can redirect it in other places in pursuit of our goals. And again, I want to emphasize these are all extremely good things. But as we'll see at the end here, I think Stoicism exists in a duality. And the other side of that duality needs to be focused on for a full view of not only, I don't want to say mental health, because mental health involves much more, but definitely another side of the coin when it comes to personal improvement. The conversation that we're having about Stoicism ultimately boils down to one question: are emotions, our unconscious impulses, our symptoms, good or are they bad? Is it in some way beneficial to feel the anxiety or the fear or the rage throughout your life, even though we may perceive it as culturally inappropriate? Is there ultimately an end goal for those symptoms, for those emotions? That's the fundamental question that we have to ask when discussing Stoicism. For example, a Jungian would argue that symptoms are the roadmap to your solution. Symptoms are the roadmap to recovery. So that feeling of depression, instead of being seen as something that must be overcome or something that must be gotten rid of, rather you're looking one layer beyond that depression. You're saying, what is causing that depression? The depression is responding to something, and what we want to figure out, what is it responding to? What is it trying to tell me? Right? And this is obviously going to be the fundamental perspective that you have to take when pursuing a treatment. If somebody is super rich, wealthy, famous, they have a great family, all this stuff, they have everything they could imagine, but they're depressed, that's a different reason for depression than somebody who lives, alone or with their parents and doesn't have a job or just lost family members, all this stuff. These are different reasons. They're going to need different treatment. So here's an analogy that I came up with to explain the differences between a Jungian perspective and a Stoic perspective. Stoicism is like an anti-inflammatory medication. You take it and it's going to result in immediate effects. Are those effects good effects? They absolutely are. Is it going to ensure that, for example, your knee is functional the next morning, that the pain goes down? All that stuff? Absolutely. But relying too much on that anti-inflammatory can actually be negative. Let's say you're somebody who works out often. You want the inflammation. The inflammation is what you're working out to get. That inflammation is going to actually promote your adaptation to that stimulus. And so what you're searching for is the inflammation. In that case, it's good. So from the Jungian perspective, these negative emotions that we experience, these negative feelings, they're actually a response from what's called a mental immune system. Ultimately, they serve a purpose that is in some way beneficial. It doesn't mean it can't be maladaptive, but the ultimate goal is to heal you. A phrase that comes up in my classes very often is that you'll get symptoms if you're lucky. We talk about the person who's living the same life as the person who's depressed, but doesn't have depression. Right? What would you rather have? Would you rather be the person who has a terrible life but eventually develops depression, and that depression becomes a wall that you have to get over to get to the life that you want, or be the person who's stuck on the other side of the wall because they never developed the need to get onto the other side? If you didn't develop the depression, there'd be nothing telling you that something is wrong. So what do you do to actually explore these emotions? Well, there's a ton of different methods. Journaling is a popular method. But psychedelic explorations of your unconscious mind are extremely powerful. Along the lines of that is Carl Jung's own specific method, active imagination, which I will be releasing videos soon about. If you want to learn more about this often forgotten aspect of human psychological health, be sure to subscribe for more.